The echo of true greatness. They say that when a tree bears fruit, its branches bow low. I believe this. I've seen powerful men, men who built empires, who saved nations, who transformed millions of lives, yet walked among us with the humility of a monk. I once asked a wise elder why he never spoke of his accomplishments. He looked at me and said, "What is gold to a man who knows the worth of silence?" True greatness is like a whisper, felt, not flaunted. The world today teaches us to showcase, to shout from the rooftops. Social media has become a theater of self-praise. But the wise know, the more you speak of your victories, the more you devalue them. Let me tell you a story. In an old Chinese village, there lived a man named Li Shen. He was known for his simplicity. Few knew that he had once been a high-ranking general, a strategist who saved his province from war. He never spoke of it. He tilled his fields, helped neighbors fix broken roofs, and played with children in the village square. One day a traveling prince came through the village, boasting of battles, of gold, of conquests. The villagers were mesmerized. They flocked around him, offering gifts and praise. The prince noticed Li Shen sitting under a tree, silent. "You there," the prince called. "Why do you not kneel before me? Do you not know who I am?" Li Shen smiled. "I know who you are, but do you know who you are without all that noise?" The prince was stunned. The villagers later learned of Li Shen's true identity. Their respect for him doubled, not because of what he had done, but because he never needed to speak of it. There is a wisdom in restraint. The silence of a man who has seen much is more powerful than the screams of one who has seen little. What we don't say reveals more than what we do. The curse of recognition. Recognition, at first glance, feels like light, but too much light blinds. The moment you begin to crave applause, your soul begins to rot. Slowly, invisibly. I've seen this happen with the young. A small success becomes a pedestal. They climb it, declare themselves kings, and then spend the rest of their lives trying to stay on top, afraid of being forgotten. They become slaves to their image, prisoners of praise. Have you ever noticed how the loudest man in the room often has the least to say? There was once a philosopher in Persia. His name is long forgotten, but his words remain. He said, "When you drink from the cup of admiration, sip, don't gulp. For thirst for praise is never quenched. To chase validation is to live for others' shadows. The wise build in silence. They plant seeds in darkness, knowing the fruit will ripen in its own time. They do not fear obscurity. They welcome it, because it is in the quiet that one's character is forged. Imagine a mountain. Does it shout of its height? A river? Does it boast of its depth? Yet we know their power, we feel it. Do your work. Let others talk about it if they must. But you remain unmoved. Because if applause is your fuel, silence will break you. The strength of the hidden. There's an old Japanese saying, "The nail that sticks out gets hammered down." But the deeper truth is this: not all nails were meant to be seen. The world worships visibility, but visibility is not value. Often, the most influential people are the ones we never hear about. They move behind the curtains, guiding, shaping, lifting, without a name, without a plaque. Do you know who raised the thinkers of the world? Mothers who never went to school, farmers who fed revolutions, teachers who stayed in dusty villages while their students went on to change nations. You must ask yourself, do you want to be remembered? Or do you want to matter? When you do good without seeking recognition, the universe remembers, God remembers, and most importantly, your soul remembers. I knew a man who built hospitals in secret. Every time he earned, he gave. No articles, no interviews. When he died, the people came, thousands of them. They wept, not because they lost a celebrity, but because they lost a servant. He lived like the wind. You couldn't see it, but you felt it. And in the end, that's all we need. To be felt, not seen. The quiet crown. What is the crown of the wise? Not gold, not titles, not applause. The crown of the wise is peace. When you no longer need the world to know who you are free. The sages of old, Aristotle, Al-Farabi, Confucius, they lived not for recognition, but for truth. They knew that a life spent proving oneself is a life wasted. They found joy in understanding, not attention. I once heard an elder say, "If you truly want to know a man's strength, see how he behaves when no one is watching." So I speak to you, whoever you are, wherever you are. Let your work speak. Let your silence roar. Build, give, love, serve, and walk away. Let the fruits fall in their season. Let your name vanish if it must, but let your spirit live on in deeds. Because the man who needs no spotlight is the one who becomes the light for others. And that is true greatness. They say that when a tree bears fruit, its branches bow low, and truly I have found that to be more than just a poetic image. It is a principle of life. Years ago, I met a man named Haruto while traveling through the countryside of Japan. He lived in a modest wooden house by a riverbank, wore faded robes, and worked as a potter. He greeted me with a smile, offered me tea, and spoke little. As we talked over several evenings, I learned something extraordinary. Haruto had once been an award-winning architect in Tokyo. He designed hospitals, museums, entire districts. His name had once graced magazines and news broadcasts, but he left it all. When I asked why, he said, "When the applause was loudest, I could no longer hear my own heart." He told me that recognition had become a prison. He was praised so often and so publicly that his identity became entangled with the praise. He was no longer Haruto. He was the architect. And when he looked in the mirror, he saw only a performance, not a person. What he said next has never left me. I realized that my soul was being rented out to others, and their approval was the landlord. He gave it up, all of it, and now he molded pots from clay with his hands. No applause, no fanfare, but peace. There is a greatness in this, the kind that does not hunger for eyes, but seeks alignment with one's own spirit. Contrast this with a man I once worked with, a wealthy CEO, famous for his rise from poverty. Every room he entered, he made sure everyone knew of his success. He plastered his achievements across every wall and speech. Yet I never once saw him smile without effort. He was exhausted, constantly trying to maintain an image. If someone forgot to praise him, he grew bitter. His wealth, his power, all were chains disguised as crowns. True greatness isn't interested in noise. It is like the sun. The sun never boasts, but its presence is undeniable. It warms, nourishes, illuminates, silently. And just like that, the truly great warm the hearts of others, not through speeches, but through presence, through grace, through restraint. The curse of recognition. Recognition is seductive. It flatters the ego, but empties the soul. There is a parable in Sufi tradition that speaks to this. A dervish once saved a child from drowning in a flooded river. The villagers praised him, lifted him on their shoulders, sang his name. That night, the dervish wept. A boy asked, "Why are you crying?" You saved a life. The dervish replied, because I began to believe I was the hero of the story. And in that moment, I lost a part of my purity. It is a deep lesson. When we do good and seek reward, we plant seeds that grow into pride. And pride, when watered by attention, grows into arrogance. Think of the artists who created masterpieces but died in obscurity. Vincent van Gogh sold only one painting in his lifetime. He was considered mad. Today, he is revered, but he never chased the spotlight. He painted because his soul demanded it. Would his work have been better if he had followers and fame? No. In fact, he might have painted less, distracted, like many of today's creators who paint not from inspiration, but for attention. Or consider the great Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi. He once dreamt he was a butterfly, and upon waking, could not tell if he was a man dreaming he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was a man. When people began flocking to hear him speak, he stopped appearing in public. Too many eyes, he said, make the truth nervous. When the goal becomes recognition, the truth becomes diluted. You begin to say what is popular, not what is right. That is the curse of being known. You are no longer free to be yourself. One of the strongest men I ever knew was my grandfather. Not strong in the way of soldiers or athletes, but in quiet endurance. He never had a formal education. He worked in the fields from the age of 9, raised 6 children, never once asked for praise. He taught me how to fish, how to listen, how to be still. Only after his death did I learn that he had paid for the education of over 12 village children, quietly, without ceremony. Because, as he used to say, if you want to see God, watch how someone gives when no one is looking. He understood the strength of the hidden. We live in a world that idolizes the visible, but the roots of the tree are never seen. And yet, they hold up everything. The mother who wakes early to feed her children, the teacher who stays late to help a struggling student, the friend who checks in when no one else remembers. These are heroes. Invisible, often forgotten, but eternal in their impact. There's an African proverb, the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. In other words, the one who causes harm may forget, but the one who serves with love leaves a mark no one forgets. You don't need to be seen to be significant. You just need to be sincere. In the end, every crown is temporary. Kings die, statues crumble, trophies gather dust. But there is a crown that lasts, the one unseen, worn on the inside, the crown of integrity, of peace, of silent impact. Al-Farabi, the great Kazakh philosopher, once wrote, "The most virtuous society is not the loudest, but the one whose members give without asking, speak without shouting, and lead without being seen." This is the philosophy I try to live by. Some days I succeed, others I fail. But I have learned that the less I care about being remembered, the more I live a life worth remembering. There's a story of an old monk who carved wooden statues for temples. His work was admired across kingdoms. One day a prince asked him, "What is your secret?" The monk said, "I carve until the wood shows me what it wants to become, and I stop before my pride wants me to continue." That's wisdom, to do just enough to give your best, and to step away. Let your work live its own life. Let your gifts speak in silence. Because at the end of it all, no one will remember how loudly you shouted your name, but they will remember how deeply you touched their soul, even if they never knew your name. That, my friend, is the quiet crown, and it fits only those who never asked for it.